Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Today, President Trump signed a pair of executive orders fulfilling his pledge to implement what he called extreme vetting for arrivals from dangerous nations, mostly in the Middle East. The order blocks Syrian refugees from entering the country until a stronger vetting process can be implemented. The orders also suspend all refugee arrivals for a period of the next 3 months and cap total refugees at 50,000 for this year. That's less than half of the previous limit. The orders are already being labeled a Muslim ban by critics who say they won't actually make this country any safer. One of those critics is Kevin Appleby. He's director of migration policy at the Center for Migration Studies of New York, and he joins us on the set. Kevin, it's good to see you tonight.
Thanks for having me.
So I think the kind of core question around the entire refugee issue is, why does bringing in refugees from places like Syria benefit American citizens? What's in it for America?
Well, first of all, it's soft power. The U.S. has soft power. They're able to help other countries who share the burden of the refugees, and in that way, they're able to negotiate other issues with them that they're interested in, they're in our vital interests. It's also a humanitarian gesture. I mean, we're a nation of immigrants. We're a nation of safe haven. A lot of these Syrians are fleeing terror themselves.
Yes.
They're very vulnerable. Mostly women and children are coming here. They're not threats, and they go through more security checks than any arrival to this country. It's usually a 2 to 3 year process for one Syrian to get into this country. So they're very well vetted. They're not security risks. I don't understand why the president is banning them from coming in, because we need to provide support to this situation.
Okay. I mean, I don't think anybody doubts that a lot of these are decent people fleeing the worst possible circumstances. But I want to get back to a question that I think it's fair to ask, and I just want to flesh out your answer a little bit more. What is in it for American citizens? It's also fair to ask, why should we pay for this? And there is some risk. There's always going to be some risk. Why should we assume that risk? You said it's because other countries like it when we do it, I think is what you said.
No.
What do we get out of that?
Let's talk security. I would argue it makes us more secure than less secure, because what ISIS and other extremist groups want is exactly what the president gave them today: a war between the West and Islam. It's a recruiting tool for them. The president's now a poster child for ISIS to recruit Muslims all over the world, including our own country, and to radicalize them. Look, the United States doesn't like you. They don't like Islam. You have to come to our cause.
So now ISIS
that plays into their hands, and it really makes us less safe over the long term. And if you ask any security expert, they'll say the same thing.
Well, I don't think we have a security expert available to vouch for that right now, but I just want to get to the logic behind it. You're saying that now ISIS is really going to dislike us, and they're really going to say mean things about us. So unless we let in people from Syria, they're going to hate us? Don't they already hate us?
It's not just about Syria. It's about all the Muslim countries that the president is banning.
But don't they
from.
already? I mean, their case
it's looked
has been
upon as an attack on Islam, not just on Syrians.
But I mean, I can say this definitively. ISIS has been making that case since its origination. I mean, since they began, and Al Qaeda before them, and various radical Muslim groups in the Middle East before them. They've always said this is a religious war and that we hate Islam. And so it sounds to me like you're blaming the United States and our policy for their distorted view of the United States.
No. What I'm saying is, what's the best policy in the long term to keep us safe? And keeping Syrian refugees out of this country, who are well vetted and are very vulnerable, is not the best method, because it plays into their hands. It gives them another tool to radicalize someone here in this country. I mean, the attacks on this country have been from people that have been here and have been radicalized. This allows them to use social media. Look what the president's doing here. They hate you. And it creates fear among the Muslim community. The other thing is...
Wait a second. Hold on. Before you get to the other thing, let's get to the first thing. You just said something I want to respond. So you're saying that people in this, you're conceding that refugees and children of refugees in this country, because it's factually true, have already committed acts of terror against Americans.
Not true.
Well, the Tsarnaevs?
I'm sorry?
The Tsarnaev brothers?
Well, they didn't technically come through the refugee program.
Okay, but they were, in effect, refugees from another country brought here at public expense. They became radicalized and killed a bunch of Americans.
Right, but others that had been radicalized weren't refugees. I mean,
many were the children of refugees, as you know. Well, I mean, in Minnesota, there have been a number of terror plots.
But
no, some of them were American-born, but their parents were brought here as refugees.
Well, not. We can dispute the facts.
No, actually, we can't. Those are the facts.
No, they didn't come through the refugee program itself.
But look, you're basically saying
there are different ways to come
that we have to let more people in, or else we'll be hated more by Islamic extremists. I think that's your point.
Well, what I'm saying is, it's in our interest to resettle a certain number of refugees in order, first of all, to show global leadership, but also to have leverage over other countries so that they'll do the same thing. Otherwise, the world is chaos. And it improves our relations with those countries so that if we want something else from them, we can get it.
Here's what I'm a little confused by. There's a moral component in this. And
Yeah.
a lot of the refugees who come to this country, you said it's our duty, basically. And a lot of them are Christian organizations, and I support those organizations. But in case after case, these groups, and the Conference of Bishops, I think, is one, Lutheran Social Services is another, Christian groups who bring these refugees into America, help them resettle here, and then offload the cost on taxpayers. How is that consistent with a person's Christian duty? Why are you doing your Christian duty if you're forcing other people to pay for a good work like that?
Well, it is a government-private partnership, private-public partnership with these organizations. And yes, taxpayer money pays for the resettlement of refugees. But churches contribute to this. It's not just solely paid for the taxpayer.
Okay, but why wouldn't
it is truly a partnership?
Okay, but it's not really a partnership. It's not a voluntary partnership. I don't support it. I'm required to pay for it. So are hundreds of millions of other Americans.
Well, there are a lot of things that we're required to pay for.
Of course, but churches say this is our duty as Christians.
Yeah.
If it's your duty as a Christian, why aren't you paying for it yourself?
Well, a lot of people are.
Really, name a Christian resettlement group that helps bring refugees in and actually absorbs the full cost. There isn't one.
Not the full cost, but they contribute costs
that?
from their parishioners and others who want to help these people, not only in money, but in time and energy.
But I don't understand. How can you claim you're being virtuous if you're forcing someone else to pay for it? If I rob you at gunpoint,
they do it on their own.
No, because you're using government money taken by force from taxpayers to finance something you think is virtuous.
Well, you can say that about a lot of issues.
Yeah, but you're making a moral claim to it. You're saying we're good people, we want to do good works, and my question is then why wouldn't you pay for those works? If I rob you at gunpoint and take that money and put it in a collection plate, I don't get credit from God from that, do I?
I guess we'll all find out. But
no, but it's a sincere question. If it's your Christian duty, why wouldn't you pay for it?
Well, the truth of the matter is that we do pay for it in a lot of ways.
No, actually, the truth is you don't. The Catholic bishops, a huge part of this budget comes from taxpayers, and the cost of refugee resettlement and the ancillary costs, education, healthcare, housing, food, are borne almost entirely by taxpayers. And so my question is, if you're doing it, if it's a good work, why wouldn't you pay for it?
Well, we're going around in circles here.
No, but you haven't answered the question.
Part of it is a responsibility the government has undertaken as part of our foreign policy to show humanitarian leadership to refugee situations around the world, which I think is in our foreign policy interest. And you can ask Brett Scowcroft and other experts who will say the same thing.
Can you name one specific benefit the U.S. has derived from settling refugees? Specifically, not just they like us more, we show leadership, but like what specifically have we gotten out of it?
I think we've increased security in nations throughout the world. They become destabilized when you have too many refugees in a certain country or a certain area.
Name one country that's become much more stable because we've allowed its refugees to move here and paid for their resettlement.
I'll talk about countries that have not become unstable because we've helped them.
No, I'm just asking for one tangible, just
Lebanon, for
one
example,
tangible
which
benefit.
Has 1.5 million Syrian refugees in their country, right? And we've helped them with foreign assistance to maintain those refugees so that they don't go into political downspout.
Okay, but
that's in the interest of the United States.
I'm saying how many countries can you name, or how about one whose refugees we have taken into our borders, and it's made that country more stable and us more safe? Just name one.
I would say Syria is one of them.
Syria is in pretty good shape now.
Turkey.
We've taken a lot of Turks.
We've taken Syrians from Turkey, for example. That's all part of helping Turkey keep their borders open so that people can flee and have their lives saved.
Turkey seems in rough shape, but the debate continues.
Well, okay.
Kevin, thanks for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Well, more debate tonight. We're going to talk to a Democratic congressman who has opposed the border wall that appears to be on its way. That's coming up. First, more details on Trump's new executive orders. They're just the latest wave of decrees to emanate from this administration. Fox News correspondent Trace Gallagher has been following him, and he's here with the details. Trace?
Tucker making good on a campaign promise to keep radical Islamic terrorists out of the U.S. Today, President Trump went to the Pentagon to join Defense Secretary James Mattis and sign an executive order to change the nation's refugee policies, establishing new vetting measures for those coming from Muslim-majority countries. Watch.
We want to ensure that we are not admitting into our country the very threats our soldiers are fighting overseas.
Trump also signed an executive memorandum, which is not as legally binding as an executive order, putting in motion his plan to build up the nation's military. And one day after calling off their meeting scheduled for next week, President Trump and Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto spoke on the phone for an hour. The White House says the two leaders had a constructive and productive conversation, talking about the, quote, importance of the friendship between the two nations and the need for the two nations to work together to stop drug cartels, drug trafficking, and illegal guns and arms sales. The White House also acknowledged the two sides' differences concerning the wall and who will pay for it. Trump later reiterated that he has not ruled out imposing an import tax on Mexican goods, something the editorial boards of the New York Times, Washington Post, and our corporate cousin Wall Street Journal called a bad idea. Experts add that Trump's recent comments on Mexico have led to a steep drop in the value of the peso. Trump also talked torture today. Despite his support for harsh interrogation techniques like waterboarding, the president said he would defer to Defense Secretary Mattis. Listen.
So I'm going to rely on him. I happen to feel that it does work. I've been open about that for a long period of time. But I am going with our leaders.
British Prime Minister Theresa May says she also condemns torture and would make that clear to President Trump. Today, the president and the prime minister held a joint news conference trying to promote a united front. Tucker.
Thanks a lot, Trace. President Trump hosted British Prime Minister Theresa May at the White House today. It was President Trump's first meeting with a foreign leader, and he used it to reaffirm America's commitment to the NATO alliance, which he previously had criticized repeatedly while campaigning for president. Watch.
On defence and security cooperation, we're united in our recognition of NATO as the bulwark of our collective defence. And today, we've reaffirmed our unshakable commitment to this alliance. Mr. President, I think you confirmed that you're 100% behind NATO.
I will be representing the American people very, very strongly, very forcefully. And if we have a great relationship with Russia and other countries, and if we go after ISIS together, which has to be stopped, that's an evil that has to be stopped, I will consider that a good thing, not a bad thing. How the relationship works out, I won't be able to tell you that later.
Well, a strong NATO alliance, that's what the Brits want. It sounds like a great idea. Who could possibly oppose that? But what would it really mean for the United States, this strong NATO alliance? Charles Krauthammer is a syndicated columnist and author of the book Things That Matter. He joins us. He's thought a lot about questions like this. He's got a great column on it today. Charles, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So it's Article 5 of the NATO alliance, about 70 years old, that really gets to the heart of it, as far as I can tell. 28 member countries in NATO, and as it currently stands, an attack on one, I'm paraphrasing, but is an attack on all. Basically, it's a defense guarantee for all members. I would bet you money that Trump at one point is going to say, why would American troops guarantee the safety of, I don't know, Estonia, Lithuania, Albania, countries that, aren't that important? Why would we send our troops to defend them? What would you say?
Well, the Russians, the Soviets asked themselves that question every day during the 50 years of the Cold War. Would Americans really want to die in a nuclear war for East Berlin?
Exactly.
After all, the Germans hadn't been very kind to anybody during the Second World War. But this is the essence of deterrence, and this is the point of alliances. We don't do these alliances out of charity. I think that's what's wrong with Trump's America First vision. It assumes that foreign relations are a zero-sum game. They rip off our economy. They rip off our generosity. The fact is that when you have allies, and this is why people have had allies since the pharaohs, you multiply your power at lower cost. This is enlightened self-interest. The Marshall Plan wasn't charity. The Marshall Plan was a way to create a phalanx of countries who are sympathetic to us, democratic, to hold back, to weaken, to resist, to deter an existential enemy.
Yes.
And it worked without a shot fired. But you've got to have deterrence. You've got to have the other side believe that you will at least think about defending them with your own country.
Yes.
It's always been a problem. There was never a 100% guarantee that the Russians would believe that we would deter them if they took East Berlin. But they believed it. They didn't do it. And in the end, they gave up.
But the Marshall Plan rebuilt big, significant economically meaningful countries, rebuilt Western Europe to the benefit, I think, of everyone, and it was a bulwark against the Soviet aggression, of course. But we're now committed to a lot of little countries that aren't inherently significant. And so why are Estonia's interests the same as ours?
15 weeks before the announcement of the Marshall Plan by General Marshall at Harvard in May '47, the U.S. decided to defend Greece and Turkey, small countries. Who cares about Greece and Turkey? 1947, the British had protected them, but they ran out of money, they ran out of will after the Second World War. They were done. Truman made the momentous decision,
yes,
which he announced in Congress, that we would defend countries that were being undermined essentially by communism. We understood that small leads to large. Look, it was Chamberlain who said at Berlin, he said after Munich, when he made the deal with Hitler that essentially handed Czechoslovakia over to Hitler, he said, why should we care about a country, Czechoslovakia, far away of people we do not know?
Right.
But that's the point of alliances. You defend people far away that you do not know. And if you do that well enough and securely enough and in a way that is convincing enough, you have developed an alliance that creates sort of a community of free nations that will help you in a pinch, that will be there to defend you, and that will resist the greater evil. It's always the greater and the lesser evil.
Right.
And small countries, are not to be dismissed.
No, and I agree with that. And when Article 5, the one time, I think, was only invoked once after 9/11, and we did
help us.
That's exactly right, and we got something out of it. But you could also see how this could go very wrong, as that famous web of alliances in 1914 produced the First World War. So Russia moves against one of these tiny countries, and all of a sudden, our sons are over there dying for the sake of Estonian freedom. And I don't think that would have much popular support here. Do you think?
I don't think the defense of Germany in the 40s and the 50s would have had a lot of popular support. But that's not how you gauge these things. Was it the wise policy? Did it keep us free? Did it hem in? This was containment. This was not war with the Soviets. This was not reckless. The idea was if you contain them long enough, their system will collapse from the inside, and that's exactly what happened. Without a shot fired, our greatest geopolitical enemy, the ones that made you and me duck and cover growing up,
for sure,
they disappeared. Now, there's always a threat coming up, but the fact is that if you have allies, you've multiplied your strength. Yes, you create risks, but on balance, it's worked extremely well for us for 70 years, and you blow it up at your peril. It's like you say with Obamacare. You can repeal, but then you got to replace. So what replaces it? Russian domination, Chinese domination, anarchy, chaos. The last place we want that is Europe. The spread of chaos is probably the biggest threat. And when you have stability, you do what has maintained it for 70 years.
I don't know if I buy that completely. That's the best argument I've ever heard, and you're kind of convincing me a little bit. Chaos is the worst thing.
Well,
if you can stop chaos, it's worth it.
I'll come back and we'll finish this later.
Thank you, Charles. Charles Kramer, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Up next, the March for Life brought thousands of people to Washington today, all to demand an end to abortion. We'll talk to one of the marchers who used to work in a Planned Parenthood clinic. Also, President Trump is pushing ahead with his plan to build a wall along our southern border. We'll talk to a member of Congress who hopes to block that wall, and we'll ask him why.
Life is winning again in America.
It is no coincidence that the first right cited in the Declaration of Independence is the right to life.
This administration will work with the Congress to end taxpayer funding of abortion and abortion providers. And we will devote those resources to health care services for women across America.
Well, thousands of abortion opponents from around the world descended on Washington, D.C. today for the March for Life, and they enjoyed unprecedented support from the new administration. Vice President Pence became the first vice president in American history to address the march in person, while counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, spoke as well. President Trump expresses his support, where else? On Twitter. We're joined today by one of the marchers. Abby Johnson was once director of a Planned Parenthood clinic in Bryan, Texas. After a moral crisis, she quit, and now she campaigns against what she once endorsed. Abby, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I got to be honest with you, I never thought of President Trump as, a huge pro-lifer, an evangelical, social conservative, and yet, amazingly, they've been more supportive of this march than any Republican president I'm aware of. I mean, there's never been a vice president address one of these, Kellyanne Conway. I mean, are you surprised by this support?
I am a little surprised, but I'm feeling very hopeful for the future, for the pro-life movement. And I'm going to be honest, I was a skeptic. And, he's beginning to prove me wrong here. So I'm glad for that.
What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think that that the pro-life movement helped to elect Donald Trump.
Yes.
And so I think that this is one way that he can express his gratitude to the pro-life movement for putting him in that position and for supporting him throughout his election. And I'm really happy he's doing it.
It's interesting because in places like Washington and New York and Los Angeles, the single most embarrassing thing you can say, the surest way to be ostracized socially, is to say you oppose legal abortion. People just hate that. And Trump doesn't seem to care.
Well, he doesn't seem to care about most things.
I guess that's a good point.
So I think he just calls it like he sees it. And, as someone who experienced a conversion on the issue of abortion, I believe that sometimes people who do convert to the pro-life movement really have a strong voice because they've seen the damage that the abortion industry can do, and now they can really speak about the life issue.
So President Trump has pledged repeatedly on the campaign trail anyway to defund Planned Parenthood, which takes hundreds of millions of dollars from taxpayers every year. You worked at Planned Parenthood for a while. The obvious question is, do you think the people at Planned Parenthood have any kind of moral qualm about abortion at all, or do they see it just as another medical procedure?
I think they see it just as another medical procedure, but I think that it is really the cost center surrounding Planned Parenthood and the services they provide. I mean, that is their highest revenue generating product that they sell. They implement abortion quotas in all of their clinics.
What do you mean quotas?
You have to perform a certain number of abortions every month. One of the reasons that I left...
Are they explicit about that?
Yes. It's in your budget, right there on the line item. One of the reasons I left Planned Parenthood was because in a budget meeting I was told to double that abortion quota. And for me, as someone who had spoken to the media and had said, we're about reducing the number of abortions, we're about, prevention, all of these other services, I was shocked to hear
since
this.
you actually worked at a Planned Parenthood, give us some sense of the relative number of abortions versus the number of mammograms versus the amount of prenatal care offered.
So, abortions, Planned Parenthood provides over 330,000 abortions a year. They are the largest single abortion provider in our country. They provide not one mammogram. There's not one Planned Parenthood clinic across the country that has a licensed mammogram machine. Or as a licensed mammogram facility, even though Cecile Richards and Joy Behar and many other people said that they do perform mammograms, they eventually had to come out and say that they don't. Planned Parenthood is not a provider of prenatal care. There are a few affiliates that may give out some prenatal vitamins. They might see you one time if you're pregnant, but there are no Planned Parenthoods that actually deliver children. The bulk of their services are contraceptive services and abortion.
Interesting. So that talk about being a healthcare provider, providing the whole spectrum of reproductive-related healthcare services, it's really about contraception and abortion.
Sure. Well, and listen to this. We just found out recently there are at least 2 Planned Parenthood facilities in the country, one in Madison, Wisconsin, one in Overland Park, Kansas. They are abortion providing only 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, abortion all day, every day.
That's pretty hard to take. Abby, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Up next, President Trump's border wall, I beg your pardon, is making Democrats howl. We'll talk to one of those Democrats next. Well, up next on tonight's agenda, the wall. President Trump says he's going to build it and has signed executive orders to start the process. Democrats are trying to build their own wall in response, a wall of votes in the Congress that will deny Trump's plan to fund the wall across the southern border. One of the bricks in the defensive wall is Democratic Congressman John Yarmuth of Kentucky. He joins us tonight from Louisville. Congressman, thanks a lot for coming on.
Oh, thanks, Tucker. Good to be with you.
You've heard a lot of people in the last couple of days, many on the left, Democratic Party, the government of Mexico, describe the wall, the proposed wall, as immoral. Do you think that's right? Do you have a moral problem with the wall on the border?
Well, I think it's wrong in a lot of ways. My biggest objection to it is that it doesn't make any sense. Too many people equate border security with a physical obstruction, and that's not the reality of the situation. I've been to the border. I've talked to the Border Patrol officers, and what they say is walls or obstructions or fences or whatever it is make sense in heavily populated areas, but they don't make sense in remote areas. The only benefit of a wall or a fence or whatever kind of physical obstruction is that it delays a person from getting over the wall and therefore the ability to apprehend them. So if you're in Juarez across the border from El Paso and you get into El Paso, the Border Patrol has like 30 seconds to get you before you're beyond their apprehension. If you're in the desert 100 miles away, they have 24 hours or maybe even 48 hours to actually get you before you get to a place where you could disappear. And so the idea, just logically and logistically, that it makes sense to build a 2,000-mile wall is absurd.
So, but I want to talk about that in just one second, but just back to my original question. You seem to hedge a little bit in your answer, so I want to press you. Do you have a moral problem with it? Many people in your party do have a moral problem with it. They say it out loud. And I wonder if you do, and if so, why? Does the country have a right to build the wall? The Mexicans say we don't. Democrats say we don't. What do you think? Yeah, well,
we have a right to, and I'm not sure the morality enters into it. I mean, I think it's a question.
That's fair.
Everybody wants to have secure borders. I think there's no question about that. But when you factor in, you have property rights, you have environmental issues, and those types of things, then it's not necessary. I mean, there's a philosophical issue involved. I'm not sure it's morality. There's nothing immoral about a wall, and but there's certainly, from my perspective, as public policy, it's a question of whether it makes sense and whether it makes economic sense and environmental sense and all the other.
Whether it works or not. Then what do you? I mean, we have some examples, and they're not exactly the same. We can extrapolate from them. So the famous wall in Israel, for example, it's 440 miles long. And it's not all urban area. And of course, it's been wildly effective, and the U.S. government supported it from the very beginning. And it ended terrorism there. There's another wall between Egypt and Israel. It's also been similarly effective. It reduced immigration across there illegally by 99%. And there's, of course, a wall now in Eastern Europe, which has been very successful. And it's hundreds of miles long. So if the walls don't work, why have those walls worked?
Well, it depends on where you are and what kind of dynamic you're involved with. We have 700 miles of barriers right now. So we have barriers on 1/3 of the southern border already. Are they effective? In certain places they are. Again, I've been to El Paso and Juarez, where there are 3 or 4 layers of fences. And it takes a while for somebody to get over all of those obstructions. They get over them just as they would get over a 30-foot wall or a 20-foot wall or a 50-foot wall, or they'd get under it. The question is what happens after they get over or under the wall.
Right.
And that's what we ought to be focused on.
I think
and we can do that. We have the technology available. I was part of the Gang of 8 in the House that worked on comprehensive immigration reform in 2013, and we dealt with all those issues. And even members of the Gang of 8 who were from Texas said, But
I mean, the Congress didn't actually deal with all those issues because we have hundreds of thousands of people coming into the country illegally. And the bulk of the heroin that comes into this country comes through that border, as you know, and it's devastated your state, Kentucky, and Jefferson County, I think, which you represent, has the highest overdose rate in the state of Kentucky. I'm sure you know all about this. That's Mexican heroin.
Oh, yeah.
And so what we're doing isn't working. How does it help your constituents specifically to oppose this wall, which, I don't know, it's different. It might work. Status quo is not working.
No, I mean, everybody I've talked to in the border security area and the drug enforcement area says that's not the issue. The issue is not whether because you're never going to build obstructions that are going to keep all of these, keep drug dealers or illegal immigrants out of the country.
I mean,
Okay,
the reality is, if you look at the statistics, over the last few years, we've actually had an improvement over in terms of illegal border crossings, and we've reduced those. The border patrol are actually doing pretty good jobs. There's a technology that we can deploy that would improve that even further.
So you're saying that it's kind of working, even though heroin is killing all these people in your state, and there are hundreds of thousands of people coming in this country, with 11 million illegally here. It doesn't seem like it's working, and I just don't understand why. If you stop 50% of those, it would be an advantage to us, wouldn't it?
Well, you know, you've got a cost-benefit analysis there, but Tucker,
the costs are high.
We have a 40-year low now in terms of net illegal immigration from the Central America.
I don't think that's true.
Low.
No, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's right. Have you seen the numbers? No. I mean, just the recent numbers. In 2010, I mean, in 2010, it was like half what it is just this last year. I mean, there was a massive surge in the last year of people crossing illegally, and a lot of them were apprehended, but a lot of them weren't. And so, like, if you were able to stop 50% of that, wouldn't that be a huge gain? Okay.
Your numbers are different than mine. We have a net. We have actually a net negative illegal immigration thing. More people are going back to Mexico than are coming. We're now under
Mexico,
11 million undocumented. We have less than 11 million undocumented immigrants now, which is a long-time low. And you know, Mexico is not the only source of illegal drugs.
I don't think anyone thinks it is
coming into this country.
But it's the biggest source. So, okay, we're out of time, Congressman. With respect, I don't think those numbers are right, but perhaps I'm wrong. I still think it's a problem. But I appreciate your coming on. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.
Up next, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard recently met with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, then came back to the U.S. and said Syria's moderate rebels are a myth. How did Assad's government win the apparent backing of a Democrat from Hawaii, and what does the Trump administration think of all of this? Congresswoman Gabbard joins us live next. Well, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has an unlikely defender, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. At some personal risk, the Hawaii Democrat recently made a secret 7-day trip to Syria and Lebanon, where she met Assad along with many civilians and clergy and soldiers caught up in the conflict there. When she came back, she denounced the previous administration's efforts to depose Assad as both illegal and harmful to the Syrian people and American interests. What did she see there? Congresswoman Gabbard is with us tonight. Congresswoman, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So you met with Assad. Not many people can say that. And Donald Trump, of course, at the same time has been emphasizing his plan to take on ISIS directly. We're not exactly sure what that means. But based on your conversation with President Assad, do you think the Assad government would welcome an alliance with the U.S. military to fight ISIS?
First of all, in your intro, I just want to make a correction. I'm not a defender of Assad. I didn't go to Syria to meet with Assad. It was not even part of the plan initially. I went there to visit with the Syrian people, to share the care, the love, and the aloha that the people of our country have for them, and to see the situation on the ground for myself. When the opportunity presented itself to meet with President Assad, I took it simply because I believe that if we profess to care for the Syrian people, if we want to end the suffering for them, we have to be willing to meet with whomever we need to in order to accomplish that. And that was much of what I discussed with him in that meeting, was how do we get to a place where we can end this war, where the terrorists in his country can be defeated, terrorists like Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all of these other groups that are working with them, and make it so that the Syrian people are able to move on with their lives, to make it so that the Syrian refugees who have fled Syria to not only the Middle East, but Europe and other parts of the world are able to return home.
So, I mean, but what do you say about U.S. policy? I mean, you spoke to him again. Not many people have done that recently. Is he open to some sort of alliance with the United States, assuming the Trump administration is open to that as well? What did Assad say to you?
I think he is looking for what our president, new president Donald Trump, would see as a shared interest with him, with Syria. And the shared interest that he has seen is this commitment to defeating ISIS, this commitment to defeating this terrorist threat that not only exists for the people of Syria, but it exists for the Middle East and for the world. And if this threat continues to grow, it's something, again, that becomes even more real than it is already for the American people.
Now, why do you think that the entire foreign policy establishment in Washington, really on a bipartisan basis, and certainly the Obama administration, put toppling the Assad regime at the top of the priority list?
You know, it's unfortunate, but it continues a track record of foreign policy decisions that the United States has made, even in the recent past, beginning with Iraq, in toppling the Saddam Hussein, with Libya, in toppling Gaddafi, and now in Syria to topple
What's the thinking behind it? I mean, you've thought about this. Why Assad? I mean, it's not a defense of Assad or his brutality.
It's this idea that the United States should be the world's police, and that the United States should say, okay, here's a bad guy, we're going to go and topple this bad guy, without thinking through what the consequences of those decisions are.
What would they be if Assad were toppled? And it looks less likely every day, but let's say that happened. Who would lead Syria, do you think?
This is the key question, Tucker, is the reality on the ground is that the strongest force are groups like al-Nusra, which is al-Qaeda, are groups like ISIS. There are many different radical jihadist groups who are fighting there, all with this same goal of toppling the Assad government, knowing that they are the most effective,
right.
They're the most powerful, they will take over. So not only will life for the Syrian people be a living hell, they will, religious minorities will face a genocide. They will pose a great threat to the region and a great threat to the world.
And you have some video, I think your husband may have shot this while you're over there, and in one clip I want to show you interview a Christian clergyman. Syria, of course, has an ancient Christian community, and this is his
He's
view.
actually in Aleppo.
In Aleppo?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, here it is.
We are not having rebels. We have terrorists. All who are modern people who think in the terms of this age are targeted by them. They want this country to be bad. They want us not to be improved and developed as a community. And their plan is to have an Islamic state in this country. And they didn't read the history. They didn't know that Christianity was spread out from this country, from Antioch.
Interesting. It's a complicated story there, but the Christian community does seem on one side of it. If you want to see more of that, unfortunately we're out of time, but go to our Facebook page. We're going to put that up. How long is it?
It's about 5 minutes long, and this reverend is talking about this. Rubble behind him is actually his church that was completely destroyed. I just want to say really quick, the call that I heard from the Syrian people was for the United States to stop arming these terrorists, to stop providing this support. And that is exactly what my legislation does. The Stop Arming Terrorists bill will make it so that we are no longer fueling and providing support to militias and groups who are working directly with al-Qaeda in Syria to try to overthrow this government, resulting in strengthening al-Qaeda and increasing the suffering of the Syrian people. It's horrific.
And killing a lot of Christians. Sounds reasonable. Thank you, Congressman. Good
Thank you, Tucker.
Coming up, she was one of the last people to talk to Donald Trump while he was still a private citizen. The great Ainsley Earhardt in the Friend Zone tonight. Stay tuned. Time for the Friend Zone, the fastest way to improve the moral tone of a show. Invite Ainsley Earhardt on. She's host of Fox and Friends every day of the week and author of the New York Times bestseller, Take Heart, My Child. A lot of the profits from that book went to a group you support, Ainsley. I don't think people even know this. It's called Folds of Honor.
Yes.
What does it do?
Well, Folds of Honor is a great organization. They provide scholarships for the children of fallen soldiers. So Major Dan Rooney, he was on a plane. He was coming back from his second tour from serving over in Iraq. He's done 3 tours. He has 5 girls. He's a pro golfer. He is in the Oklahoma Air National Guard. He has served our country. There he is. He's an amazing man. The plane was landing. He was coming back from his second tour to say hello to his family and be reunited with his family. And the pilot came over the intercom and said, if you'll all stay in your seats, we're about to take a soldier, a deceased soldier, off the plane who was fighting for our country. So he looked out the window and he watched as this flag-draped casket was going toward a family. And the man's twin brother was standing next to the casket, and they were wheeling it toward the family. And there was a little boy, Jacob, who was the son of that fallen soldier, standing in the distance. And Dan Rooney, he looked in the distance, he saw that child, and he said, that child is never going to have a father again. And being a father to 5 girls, he said, I'm going to help provide scholarship money to that child. That was the first recipient. They have raised so much money, millions of dollars. They have provided 12,000 scholarships over the course of 10 years. They have a platinum rating, so 90 cents of every dollar, Tucker, goes back to scholarship money. That is like unheard of. February 1st is the day that scholarship applications open. So if you're watching and you've lost your loved one who has fought for our great country, then you need to go on their website. You can go to their website through your Facebook page, Tucker, the Tucker Carlson Facebook page, and apply. But also, I want to remind people, Memorial Day weekend, they do this every year, and Fox always covers it. There's the National Gala, there's the Patriot Cup, and the public can buy tickets to this. It is a great event. PGA golfers are out there. You can watch them play. Steve Ducey and Peter Ducey are actually going to play in it. There's a big concert. Rascal Flatts has played before. Dierks Bentley, Lee Price, Darius Rucker. We're not sure who the musical act is going to be this year, but it's a great cause.
I'm for it. Ainsley Earhart, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Ainsley.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with more. That's it for us tonight and for the week. Tune in every night at 9 to the show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. Also, don't forget to DVR the show if you aren't doing so already. And more than anything, don't forget that Sean Hannity is next. Have a great weekend and a happy night. See you Monday.